Hi. For today's chess video, I'm going to be covering chess tactics. Basically, the things that I said I was going to cover in the chess terms video, or I said that I would cover in a separate video in the chess terms video. This is the separate video. It will be a bit longer, probably almost as long as the chess terms video, if not a little bit shorter, but I do believe that this video will be much more instrumental in developing your skills as a player, because it should inform you of, well, tactics that can help improve your game greatly. The first two things, however, are not tactics, they're simply rules. And it's because I didn't cover these in the chess terms video, which I was going to. However, I believe that you kind of need a visual in order to better understand these, and it's just one is kind of obvious, but the other I always forget. So the first is castling. So castling is a move with the king that can be made where you move the king essentially two spaces to the left or right. Of course, I switch it up backwards, and the rook swaps to the other side of the king, depending on which side he moves. Now, you can't castle if there are any pieces in the way, if there is a check in the way, or if the king would pass through check, or if the king would or if the king or the rook on that, if the king has moved, or if the rook on the side of the king, which is to castle, has moved. So for example, if I move the rook here to here, I can no longer castle this way, but I could still move this way. It'd be perfectly fine. So in this position, we can just see how it looks. Both sides will castle queenside. And there we go. You kind of just get it. Castling is very important for the beginning of the game. You want to get your king away from the center of the board, because that's where the most action is, and king's safety is always #1 priority. So, yeah. Next thing is capturing en passant. So for this situation, black's position's feeling pretty cramped. So black tries a freeing move, and a freeing move is a move that gains more space with... Oh, sorry, I forgot that I hadn't said it as black's move yet. Tries the freeing move of d5, thinking, okay, it's defended, it attacks the bishop, so it comes with tempo, which is something we will discuss later when we... move some space for my knight. I can bring my bishop out finally. It's all well and good. However, white can capture en passant, which is that if the pawn has been moved up 3 squares past its initial starting place, I guess you could say, and then a pawn to the left or right of it moves up 2 squares, so it's gone. So for white, it's gone to the 5th rank. The pawn is on the 5th rank, and then a pawn next to it moves up 2 squares. Or for black, it's on the 4th rank, and then a pawn moves up 2 squares. You can capture en passant only on the next turn. So if in this position I were to say move my bishop, he moves his bishop, black moves his bishop, I would no longer be able to capture en passant, because you have to do it the very next turn, the very next move that you can make. Otherwise, the opportunity is lost. So just try and remember that. Because it's a rule that many people forget, but when it comes in hand, but it's good to know. It can come in handy sometimes. Here we will be discussing probably the most common chess tactic you will see, which is the fork. Now, all grandmasters in the world know of the forks. They are always ready, always trying to find them. Forks are moves that, well, attack 2 pieces at the same time and threaten to win material, or to win the exchange of material. So I'll give you a second. Try and find the fork, essentially a double attack where a piece attacks 2 separate pieces. Give you a second while I have a sip of my tea. Now that ASMR is done, you obviously found it. It's knight captures on f7 because it attacks the queen and the rook. So after the queen moves, you then capture the rook, and even though you will lose this bishop, or this knight at some point, You traded your knight for a rook, which is of course a much better trade for you. The next position is also a fork. Give you a second to try and find what the fork is. Okay. Congratulations for those who are able to do it. It's just pushing pawn to d5, because you see the pawn's defended by the other pawn and the queen, if you want to be nitpicky, and it attacks both the pieces. Both of these two pieces, the knight and the bishop. And after, say, the bishop moves back, you would see something like captures, and then you would even move back here. And from this position, you're down a pawn, but you're up a knight in a completely winning position, ready to castle. You basically have your game cut out for you. The next move the next tactic or set of moves is going to be called the fianchetto or the fianchetto. Depends on how you decide to pronounce it, actually. So, start off, pawn e4. And then you see, fianchetto is where you essentially move the pawn that's directly in front of your knight up one, or down one if you're looking at it from this perspective as black, and then you move your bishop into that square that the pawn left behind. So you'll see how both the pawn moved up, and then the bishop moved in, and now you see they cover very long diagonals that can potentially be very useful later. For example, white could go here and then castle, and from here, this bishop will be a very strong defensive tool for white, whereas this bishop will be a very strong offensive tool for black. So can go both ways. But again, it just puts your bishop on the longest diagonal and is therefore one of their most effective places to be. The next thing we'll be discussing is a battery. So a battery is when you line up two or more pieces that will travel along the same linear path in order to do something. So in order to capture something, threaten something, or checkmate something. So for example, in this position, you can see how both of black's rooks are lined up along the e-file, preparing to capture. And you see what they're threatening is that after captures, and captures, it is checkmate, because the white king is attacked, and his pawns block all his escape routes. This checkmate is also commonly known as a back rank mate, where you check a king on the very back ranks, which would be, of course, the first rank for white and the 8th rank for black. You can do this with rooks. You can also do it with the queen, but most other pieces are not able to, simply because these are the only ones that work horizontally. The following, we have another battery. So again, just try and find the move really quickly. It's checkmate in one. If you need more time, just pause the video. Okay. For those, congratulations on finding it. If it's made in one, you should have found it instantly. But it's just the simple queen captures on g2, because as you can see, the queen attacks the king. She blocks all the squares that the king could go to. These two pawns block this rook and the pawn block the other two squares, and the queen is not there. The queen is defended by the bishop. So when they were back here, they formed this very nice battery eyeing along this diagonal. Okay. And here we're going to, in this position, we will be discussing tempo. Tempo is when you move a piece where the move also attacks something or creates some sort of immediate threat, or creates a powerful, creates an immediate threat that the other side has to react to. So in this position, this is the Gioco Piano game setup, which I will be covering in one of my videos probably. So from here, we'll go for the Evans Gambit, which is b4. Now, the Evans Gambit sacrifices a single pawn, your b pawn, for very rapid development. So as you can see, black accepts the pawn; it's free. We have c3. Bishop goes back to c5 in this position, and then we have d4. And you can see that when I moved up c3, I attacked the bishop, I forced the bishop back, and now again I attack, forcing the bishop to move. Because even if you capture, I just gain white gains a very strong center. And you might think, oh, well, it's attacked twice. Well, it's defended twice. And even if you were to be like, okay, captures, I win that, white wins that trade every time. So that's why you would have to then move back again. Even if you move here, it's no good. You just block with the bishop, and everything is perfectly fine. But as you can see with these two moves, or these three moves, you can see that every move attacked the bishop, and it forced black to react to their bishop being attacked. Otherwise, we would just capture the bishop and be up a piece. In the next few positions, we will be discussing pins, more specifically the difference between what a pin is and a hard and soft pin. So a pin is where a piece is attacks another piece, but it essentially prevents that piece from moving because the piece behind that piece is more valuable. So in this position, as you can see, the bishop is attacking the knight, but the knight cannot move, therefore it is pinned, because if it were to move, the king would be under attack. So even if you try to move, it just won't work. So what you have to do in this position, and this is called a hard pin, because it is illegal for you to move away from this pin, so you want to unpin as fast as possible to release the tension and release pressure on your position. So you would probably see a move like bishop to d7. Just because now it is not pinned, the bishop is merely on the same diagonal as the king. In this position, you can see that the bishop is attacking the knight. The bishop is attacking the knight, but it's also, if the knight ever moves, the queen would be captured. So this is called a soft pin, because legally, you can move your knight. Legally. In the position. It's a perfectly good move. It's a perfectly, or not good, it's a horrible move to play. But it's perfectly acceptable by the rules of the game. However, it would, if you were to move it, you would lose your queen for a bishop. And that is not a worthwhile trade in any game, usually. Well, there's probably one or two exceptions, but for the most part, it's not. It's very not worth at all. Now, we're also going to go over a quick idea here, which is called piling on. So here you see that white's knight is attacked once by this bishop. But is there any way we can add more attackers to the knight and essentially pile on the offense? Give you a couple of seconds to try and think of a few ideas. Okay. Well, the first most obvious option is that, well, our knight's under attack, so we can move our knight down, and this makes a double attack on the knight. Now, it's doubly defended, so we're fine for now. You obviously can't capture for two reasons. One, because you would just capture, and then after something like captures, you would capture back, and it would just be a complete blunder. But say white again just doesn't see it as much of a threat. He's like, I got it defended twice. I'm perfectly fine here. He plays something like this, let's say. Now you can add a third attacker with queen to f6. And now if white suddenly realizes, okay, things are starting to get a bit heavy on this knight, I'm going to play this. Then you have captures. If captures, you have two options. You can either capture here, like so, or you can capture like this. This would kind of force a queen trade for the most part, because if you, say, moved away, then you would just capture the rook, which would not be pleasant. So, captures, 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 moves up, and then finally you capture again, where white has to be kind of careful. Because, let's say white moves here, you now capture here, and then after it moves over, you get this rook. And and again, this would be yet another fork that we mentioned earlier. Okay. Here we have another we have another idea of using a hard pin offensively. This one, it's something you probably won't see immediately, but once you start understanding it's very good. Now, you can go for this bishop here. You perfectly could. It would be perfectly fine to do so. But what you could do instead is be a bit more dangerous and threaten something instead, such as bishop captures on h6. Because, you see, you can't capture back because the pawn is pinned against the king. This would be a hard pin. And now, even if you moved even if you were to say, do something like you move the bishop to attack the queen, this is just checkmate. And even if you don't move the bishop, let's say you play something else instead. You play this to block this over here. Now we do what's called attacking the defender, which is you just move your rook up, attack the piece. The piece has to move. If they don't move, so you play something like this, then just captures, and again we run into checkmate. Because you see the queen blocks all these attacks all these squares and is defended. So that's how you can kind of use a pin a bit more versatile, in a bit more of a versatile situation, because this also helps you pick. This can also just help you. You don't even have to threaten checkmate. You can just use it to pick up the pawn and gain a bit of an extra advantage in the game. Now here, I'm going to ask you another question, and remember what I've learned. Try to think about pins and all that. Can you capture the pawn? It's black to move. Alright. For those who did, let's go through it. Well, if you thought it would be okay, you probably saw something in your mind like captures, and then captures, and then captures, and you're thinking, I'm doing really well here. But in reality, you would see something like captures, then captures, and now you've just grabbed a rook for free. You don't have to capture this pawn back just yet. It's a doubled pawn. They're kind of weak. They're targets. They're very easy to attack. So you don't have to capture just yet and blunder your rook. You're perfectly fine in this position. But you've grabbed the free rook. Because, like I mentioned earlier, the bishop was pinning this pawn from ever moving. Okay. Here we'll be discussing discoveries. So discovery is when you move a piece, and because you moved that piece, it got out of the way of another attacking piece. This is only really useful with bishops, rooks, and queens, because these are the only ones that attack in linear patterns and straight lines. So here, let's say you were to move black to move, and you were to move bishop to d5. You can see that by moving the bishop away, you have opened up this check from the king. From the rook. This is a discovered check, as in, as you moved away, you discovered that there was a check in the position. And you also moved the bishop to attack this rook. So, of course, after the king moves, you capture the rook. Now, we're actually going to go back real quick. And we've discussed this rook in the position. Is there a better move in the position? A better place for the bishop to go to? Okay. Well, I should have said I'll give you a couple seconds. For those who spotted bishop to e4, good job. You grabbed check, attacked the queen, the only move that the queen can really do here, or the best move is that you're going to lose your queen, so you might as well gain something from it. So captures and captures. And then white moves away, and you're in a pretty good position. Now, for those who noticed just simply rook to d1, hats off. That's checkmate in one. It wasn't what we were going for, but I realized after I had made this puzzle about maybe after I had made this little, not puzzle, this little thing, I guess, on the board, that was in the position. So, good for you for noticing my mistake. Always be wary of back rank mates. Again, in this position, there's another discovery. I'll give you a second if you want to pause to find it, or don't, and just watch me go through it. So, the move that you want to play in this position is rook to d1. Because as you moved the rook away, you opened up the check from the bishop. See, in the last position, we saw the bishop moving away and the rook coming in. Now we have the rook move away and the bishop coming in. It can be a pawn moves and the bishop checks. It can be anything moves, and then one of the rooks, bishops, or queen checks or attacks a piece. So in this position, the white king can't defend its rook because both of these squares are covered. So its only move is to move back, and then after you capture, this is checkmate. A very beautiful checkmate at that, with this kind of bishop pair from hell. The next thing we're going to talk about extremely quickly is outposts. So this is another chess term that I probably should have covered in the video, but I realized I kind of didn't, and I realized it after I'd uploaded it, but it's fine. So an outpost is essentially a position where your knight is defended, usually by pawns, and is defended by a pawn, and there's no pawn to attack it. So in this position, after white moves knight to d5, he has a nice outpost for his knight here. Because as you can see, the knight is defended by both pawns, so if black wants to get rid of this, they have to move their knight here to capture then or something. And they don't have any pawns on the c or e file to get rid of this knight because they were already pushed up to c5 and e5. Now, you'll see in this position, just ignore this knight's here. So, in this position, if white were to try to go for a similar idea, then and try to get this outpost on d5, black always has this c6 maneuver, which has the pawn, and it can attack the outpost. Now, if they were to go back and then black were to move up again, you would now have the outpost properly. So we would say that this outpost, because it can be attacked by the pawn, is unsafe, whereas the one that could not be attacked by it is very safe. Now, we just have one more position to go through, and it comes with a little bit of a puzzle. So, in this position, it is white to move and win. Not checkmate, but be in a completely winning position. I don't know. Pause the video, try to find it. I'm going to have a drink of beer. Congratulations for those who were able to find it, and for those who don't give a damn and just want to see what it is. It's bishop to g6. You might have considered bishop to c4 attacks the piece, but attacks the king. But after you move up, even it's more than perfectly acceptable. And you can't. And then from this position, even if you trade, black can easily draw this. It's no big deal. So here what you want to do is you want to move bishop to g6 because, one, g6 is always a nice square. And two, it entices the black king to capture. Now, let's look. Why can't he capture? Because if he captures, then you capture the rook that is no longer being defended. See, because as the king moved away, he left this rook undefended. And we call this maneuver when you essentially move or force the defender away from the piece it's defending. We call this removing the defender. And it's an extremely important thing to understand, and implementing it in your games, especially when you're trying to pile on to a position, can be very effective and can lead you to many victories, especially against players who don't play properly. But anyway, let me move the other. But anyway, after this captures, this pawn will fall, and it's just, and then you can march this pawn up the board. There's no way for the black bishop to stop this. Anyway, I hope this was informative. Again, if there's any videos you want me to cover on any openings, any other ideas, I will be covering a video on chess principles. I will cover another video on how to get better at chess, and I will probably be covering a third video on what to do in the opening, because I know a lot of people who just start out struggle with that. But if you're wondering how do you practice all these tactics, how do you get used to them, and how do you get familiar with them, the idea is to use, the first thing that I recommend is do as many chess puzzles as possible. Playing the game is great, but chess puzzles force you to see the tactics and to use the tactics. So I know chess.com only lets you do 8 in a per day, or 6 per day, I don't remember, plus the daily puzzle, whereas lichess.com, that's lichess.com, it allows you to do as many puzzles as you want. They're tailored to a rating. They're not as, and they're a bit more complex usually. They're usually 3 or 4, they're usually 2 to 3 move sequences, especially the ones I do, maybe 3 to 4. But they're very instructive, and they will help you try and get better at using these tactics and seeing them faster as well, so that you can implement them in your game and save time as well. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Never like, don't ever subscribe. Yeah. Have a decent day, okay?